Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is Pax Londinium for Liminal by Wordplay Games. Okay, first a bit of history. Released in 2020, Pax Londinium is a 90-page full-colour sourcebook for Liminal that covers the area of London. It is available in hardback or PDF. To the cover. Here we have a beautifully evocative piece by Jason Benkei featuring the London Eye, which has the city shrouded in a green-tinted fog. Right, to the inside. After getting past the credits and contents pages, we arrive at a map of London which tells us the location of the various important places in the book, though the writing is fairly microscopic for my eyes, and then we move on to Chapter 1, Introduction. Here it gives us some information by the author and a list of the different references he used, and this is followed by a couple of websites that also give some good information. We then move on to Chapter 2, Liminal London. Here it discusses how to approach London as a setting. It gives some themes that one should consider when using the city. The first is that London is both a huge city and a smaller one. This is the point that, though the area of Greater London is huge, the city itself is relatively small. The second is that it is a multicultural city, being the most diverse in the UK, and that to get a true reflection of how it is, diversity should be encouraged regularly in the fashion, food, music and people. The third is that it is a city in motion, though not necessarily a fast one. Cabs, push bikes, mopeds and buses are busy above the ground, and below there is the world of the London Underground. There is generally no escape from the bustle. The fourth is that the city wears its history on its sleeve, with a real melting pot of architecture, new and old, displaying the fact that it's been destroyed twice in the Great Fire of London and the Blitz respectively, and been rebuilt. The final point is that London is a city of the hidden. You're never more than 20 feet away from something from the hidden world. Underneath the city there are crypts, catacombs and shelters long since abandoned, and the Thames has many tributaries that flow under the city that mortals can't access, but the Fae travel on with ease. Next, we move on to the reason behind the title of the book. What is the Pax Londinium? As has been mentioned, London is an ancient city that is packed with liminals, ghosts, fallen gods and goddesses and the like. Something had to be done when a rogue weathermonger miscast a spell that caused the Great Smog of 1952. The various factions met in the court of the Queen of Hyde Park, and the Pax Londinium was agreed by all. Using the Thames as a boundary, it was decided that north of the river, liminals are free to act as they see fit, but to the south, activity was to be kept to a minimum, with it being narrowed down to those tied to the area such as ghosts and those that gain permission to pass south of the river. The Pax is guarded by a number of factions. The Knowledge, a new faction that I will talk about in a bit. The Trolls of the Duchess of Bridges that stop liminals crossing to the south physically unless they are accompanied by one of the Hidden. Another new faction that I will talk about. And finally, P Division are usually on hand to dissuade those wanting to cross. Should one manage to avoid the Trolls and cross over, the Mercury Collegium, Order of St Bede and the Open Knot will monitor them. Should the liminal in question start interfering with mortals, they will be removed. The Mercury Collegium will escort them back. The Order and the Open Knot could be deadlier. After this we move on to Chapter 3, Factions of the Hidden World. The first up is the Council of Merlin. It states that they see London as a necessary evil due to the sheer amount of factions and magic in the city. They meet in the Medea's Club in Covent Garden, and this has ridiculous membership requirements that ensure that the riffraff are kept away. The inside of the club is floor to ceiling of books, oil paintings, leather chairs and raging fires. Each of the council maintains a room in the club that are hidden by a thrice-way gate, a magical portal that provides instantaneous magical transportation to the room. Only one of these gates can be maintained at a time. It also mentions that the council maintains a honey trap in the Harry Price Library of Magical Literature that contains clues as to where the Medea's Club is. Should someone crack the clues, they will earn an audience with a member of the council and a fine meal at the club. Should they prove to be acceptable, they could be taken on as an apprentice. If not, the final course of sorbet will wipe their mind of the encounter and the evening. After this, we move on to the court of the Queen of Hyde Park. Regarded as the absolute protector of the city, the Queen of Hyde Park does not just rule over the smaller courts there. It gives us the stats for the goblin-esque sprites known as boggarts, and then talks about the Duchess of the Bridges, and how she controls access into the city by placing trolls under all of the bridges that connect both sides. They are gatekeepers and are brutish creatures with knowledge of mind-bending riddles, and they only have one agenda: protect the Pax Londinium. The only exception is a liminal escorted by one of the Guild of Tunnellers due to an ancient pact they have. It gives us the stats for a typical troll, and then we move on to the Lady of Flowers. A vassal of the Queen of Hyde Park, the Lady of Flowers is the most powerful spirit of plants and trees, whose power grows and diminishes with the seasons. She is waited on by an endless retinue of daughters or flower fairies. Her realm is populated solely by female fae, and she protects all women in the city. She has 3 knights, her daughters Rose, Lily and Verbena, who are brutal enforcers of her will. Lady Verbena is statted out here. It then details the river spirit Temes, the ruler-in-waiting, a major threat to the Queen of Hyde Park. Alongside Isis, Temes could lay claim to the throne of the dead father Thames and has started to gather an entourage. His agenda is to do away with the faux Victoriana of the Queen of Hyde Park and have a more modern arrangement, with the argument being that the Fae's skill at brokering agreements makes them ideally suited to the demands of modern society. His first target is Lesnie, the Lord of Ealing Common, who he hopes to tempt to his side. After this is the Mercury Collegium. These are broken down into 4 guilds in the city: East End, Financial District, West End and south of the river. They're led by various characters that have differing methods of controlling what goes on in their area, and they will meet in the Lion and Unicorn pub to discuss all criminal matters and make sure everybody is reading from the same page. Next we have the Jaeger family. Although there are very few werewolves in the city, they maintain an office for hunter security, though this is more about maintaining a presence in the city than anything else. There is a gang called the Mohawks, and they are a thorn in the side of P Division, and are loosely allied with Mercury Collegium, who they offer door services for. There's also another kind of lycanthrope operating in the city, Queen Rat. She spies on men in vermin form and then appears to them as a facsimile of their perfect woman who will seduce them and seal their bond with a bite on the neck that confers magical luck on them as long as they tell nobody of their liaison. When the man inevitably does tell someone, they will then have a lifetime of bad luck. It then covers the Order of St. Bede. They believe that to destroy the liminals in the city would be tantamount to destroying the very soul of London, though there are so many they feel that they have to intervene. They are led by Archdeacon Rose, a man who understands the need of the many mortals outweighs that of surrendering to the supernatural waste that is the liminals. They also employ a media wing that are tasked with debunking and discrediting any evidence of the supernatural, muddying the waters of clarity for those who seek to make this kind of thing public. After this is P Division. The branch in London is known as The Watch, and they are considered the most talented and are often the most busy of those who are members. It stresses that the HQ of P Division is not actually based in London, but in an abandoned mine somewhere in Shropshire. It mentions the key players in the London branch, with the person in charge being Commander William Davenport, a strong defender of the Pax who supports Father Moore from the Mercury Collegium when required. It covers Inspector Skinner, a typical copper who is similar to the 70s and 80s stereotypical angry police officer, as well as Sergeant Silje Anderson, who is seconded from counter-terrorism, and Police Constable Nazarene Farouk, a chronomancer who barely understands her powers. It then moves on to the Sodality of the Crown. The Sodality was burned out of London in the 80s in Operation Thorn by P Division, and alongside the Order of St. Bede has managed to keep it that way. The Sodality are, however, content with this. London being their base of operation was, in hindsight, too obvious, and they now send agents into the city in order to plant seeds of chaos. Their target remains the royal family. A rogue vampire lord, John Williams, was accidentally reconstituted in 1886 when the stake was withdrawn from his skeleton by a workman who had dug his body up, and he slowly crawled through the sewers of London, regenerating his muscles and skin by feeding on rats. He dwells deep within the abandoned underground tunnels beneath London, gathering his own nest of vampires and dhampirs, sending them out into the city to bring him new converts, food, and to steal valuables. John Williams is statted out here. After this, it details the factions that are particular to London. The first is the Knowledge. A group of 50 London black cabs with identical drivers are the supernatural embodiment of the city, with encyclopedic knowledge of its streets and total knowledge of all the latest gossip. They're a neutral faction that works in the best interests of London and will often appear from nowhere when somebody really needs to get away from trouble. If the Knowledge deem you to be working against London, living there will be hellish. Traffic lights will turn to red when least needed, Wi-Fi will stop working, you get the idea. After this we have the Hidden, who are roughly based on those that live in London Below and Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere. These are the homeless that are no longer seen or acknowledged by everyday people, the lost people from the streets of London. They live in derelict buildings and the tunnels beneath them in communities they call rookeries. They call the normal people of London the Visibles, as the Hidden have faded from the view of the mundane world. They will be ignored and will generally not draw attention, which means that they often see and hear things that they were not meant to. One can engage with the faction, but their price is that of promises or favours. There's the Guild of Water and Light, known as the Lighters. They help children who have become lost or abandoned, patrolling the Thames and tunnels. There is the Guild of Tunnellers, who are guides to the labyrinth of passageways under the city. They are well known to urban exploration communities, who know that the tunnellers will help them if they get in trouble, and likewise, the tunnellers know their secret is safe with the explorers. The tunnellers also have a live-and-let-live relationship with the workers of the London Underground, who turn a blind eye to them, with the tunnellers providing the quirky messages on the station announcement boards. There's also the Guild of Sewer Hunters, those that hunt the horrors that lie beneath the city. The sewers are said to be home to black-skinned feral boars that can rend a man's flesh easily, and the rat women who can shape change to rodents. They're also in conflict with the vampires of John Williams. It covers the Guild of Street Sweepers, those that keep the streets clear for the visible by disposing of evidence of the supernatural, and though this would appear to be an altruistic endeavour, they run a sideline of selling evidence back to the hidden world. There's the Guild of Patterers, those that collect all the gossip of the city. These are the people you go to get the word on the street, and the Guild of Toshers, those that delve into the debris of the sewers to recover lost items of value. We then move on to Chapter 4, A City of Mysteries. This is a section that briefly covers some of the strange things that can be found within London, such as the pig-headed woman of Maida Vale and the ravens and ravenmaster from the Tower of London. And then we go swiftly on to Chapter 5, A City of the Dead and the Undead. This covers the death that is within the fabric of the city, and goes into where it can be found and the effect it has. Things like the plague pits, the ghost courts of London, and even the number 7 ghost bus. We then have Chapter 6, A City of Gods and Goddesses. In this chapter it goes into the fact that London is a protected city, with dozens of religions, countless artefacts, and a heavy liminal presence there. The place is a melting pot of pantheons and worship, with many places having been held by some deities for centuries. It gives the example that Westminster Abbey has been a home to a temple of Apollo and a sanctuary for Thor. As it explains, turf wars are not unknown. Gods and goddesses do not walk the streets, with the Orisha being the closest to this. It covers various legends of Britain and their connection to London, detailing some of the legendary protections that they provide for the city. Things such as Bran, the titanic ancient king of Britain's guardian head, the ravens of the Tower of London, and the goddess of the land, and even the pledge of King Arthur. It covers the powers from around the world that make their home here, such as the cult of Diana the Hunter, the Egyptian insurgency of the Children of Ra, the presence of the lion statues of Shi Wang and Mei Shi, and the Orisha of Little Lagos. We then have Chapter 7, Encounters in London. Here it details some of the more interesting parts of the bustling magical community, all flavourful additions to a liminal campaign. There is Ahmed's VHS Wonderland, a dirty, old-fashioned video shop full of old VHS equipment and the like. It is here that one can find Ahmed's real treasure, the scavenged artefacts, spell components and evidence brought to him from the streets of London by the Guild of Street Sweepers. There is Marge's Pie and Mash shop, a popular neutral meeting place for various factions to enjoy a pie and mash and hold important meetings. Nobody ever causes trouble here. Ever. There is an observed rule here that with each order, a payment is included for an extra pie, as the hidden eat for free at Marge's. There is New Aeon Books, a cringeworthy shop of artisan arcana that is owned by High Mage of London Xander Moonchild Smythe, a man with zero magical skill that is the laughing stock of the hidden world. And we have Zephyr, a liminal courier service, who zip around with magical efficiency. The LGBTQI+ community are also represented, with cryptids such as the Babadook and Mothman being adopted by them. We then shift to Chapter 8, The Worshipful Company of Investigators. This covers a specific crew in the city that have a benefactor known only as the Professor, that look into hidden world mysteries that bleed into the world of the mundane. They are quite well supported by their mysterious patron, who gives them a monthly stipend to supplement their income, and the company has provided various alumni that have gone on to greater things that are listed here. It also stats out the current company. Finally, we move on to Chapter 9, New Rules. It gives us a new type of magic for liminal, chronomancy. This deals with those magicians that can manipulate time and the flow of reality. It is a rare and much sought after talent. Their basic skill is to create ripples in time, which allows them to speed it up for them, allowing tasks to be done double quick, or slow time down for another person, though this can't be used in combat. They also have some nice flavourful powers such as the Matrix-style bullet time and the river flows backwards, which turns back time for a few seconds, allowing a reroll of a test. Finally, we have an afterword by the author, an index and some pages of art. Pax Londinium is a beautiful book to behold. The art throughout is sensational, perhaps even better than the art in the core book, which frankly takes some doing. You really get the feeling that a huge sense of pride has gone into this work. I'm glad to say that in many ways, Pax Londinium continues where Liminal left off. Those who buy the book to add flavour to their game will find an abundance of ideas within, and it reads like something that is incredibly well researched. It obviously takes its lead from the novels and television that offer this kind of flavour, but that's certainly no bad thing given the quality of the writing. Also, it's worth mentioning that chronomancy is a very worthy addition to the array of magical skills that the game already has, as it doesn't feel overpowered in any way. It feels just right. I did have a few niggling issues. The first is that it is a full 16 pages before we actually get into the book itself, and though the art in the back is nice, it feels kind of unnecessary. I would have preferred some more material on London, as this is the most engaging part of the book. Something else that I found a bit irritating was the like for like, we have a magical version of a mundane thing that a lot of the guilds have on offer. I appreciate that these are for the most part based on real old London guilds, however some of it feels like it is there just for the sake of it, and it gave it, at least for me, a bit of a Harry Potter feel at times, though this is not necessarily a bad thing for most. For me at least, it felt like it makes the hidden world just that bit too unhidden. I find it hard to believe that anybody will be disappointed with Pax Londinium, and though I had a few things that bothered me, it didn't stop me enjoying it immensely, and I imagine most people who read it won't really care and will enjoy it too. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos. Also, if you're interested in buying this product, I'll put some links below. Lastly, if you like what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon. Bud out.